Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Anthony Cosenza, and this is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We took a week off last week. Kind of needed to recharge the batteries a little bit after draft coverage and all of that. So apologize for those of you who may have missed our program last week. There was no show. Just kind of needed to relax a little bit. And so we took the week off. We missed you guys. We missed everybody that tunes into this program, but we will be talking about the Bengals yet again this week, and we are back. Even though the draft is in the rearview mirror, there are still quite a few bit of topics to talk about right now. I'm going to be joined in just a little bit by my usual co-host Scott Schultze. He's going to be I think he's going to be joining me for a little bit here, and we'll be talking about a number of topics. I just kind of want to start off with a couple of things, namely a thank you. Us that write for cincyjungle.com and all of that. Sometimes we hear, we get a lot of compliments, we get a lot of positive feedback, and it's always awesome to hear. But as always, there are folks that aren't going to like everything that you do, and that's okay. And recently, this program and myself got a little bit of a, I don't know what you want to call it, but a little bit of negative feedback on Twitter from a certain listener, and kind of went a little public, but that's okay. Not everybody has to like the program. I hope everybody does, but that's the reality is that's probably just not going to happen. But I am a people pleaser, guys. I like to give you guys what I want. But I was a little disappointed. You never like to hear negative feedback, and this is kind of a passion project. This is something that obviously we all care about the Bengals. We all care about that sort of thing, and I have my platform, thankfully, through SB Nation and Cincy Jungle and through YouTube to talk about the Bengals. And it is a prominent platform, and I'm grateful for it. But, when you hear negative feedback and kind of unsolicited negative feedback, it hurts a little bit. We regardless of what pro athletes or whoever, not that I'm on the same level of pro athlete, guys, let's calm down. But regardless of what people say, they get a lot of stuff in their Twitter, a lot of notifications, a lot of comments, a lot of that. I read most, if not all, of the feedback and things, especially geared toward this program, because I want to make it the best as possible. So I got a little negative feedback, and I was kind of feeling a little down about my abilities and what I was doing. And then, I go in here today. I see a bunch of new subscribers, which is awesome, on our YouTube channel. I see some, people. I just see things now that I'm like, this is pretty cool. Andrew Seiler, a guy who apparently is a subscriber to the podcast, says he loved this podcast. Another user, The North at Its Heights, says, "Great job, guys. Love my Bengals fix on this podcast. Been a fan for 32 years. And am English, living in England." And, to me, that's pretty cool. And it's not so much about like, hey, let me pat myself on the back. It's just the fact that this program and this show does mean something to Bengals fans, a contingent of Bengals fans. And, this is something I enjoy doing. This is something I know Scott enjoys doing. And the guests come on from their own, from their own goodwill. They come on, and the relationships I've built through working at Cincy Jungle and various podcasts, and they've come on, and it's cool. And I just want to say that I appreciate all of the feedback, whether it's on the negative side or the positive side. I do appreciate all of the feedback. I know Scott appreciates the feedback, and for every one of those kind of negative comments that we've received, I see things like that, and it makes us continue to want to do this and continue to make the program better and continue to get you content that hopefully you enjoy. And so I appreciate it. I hope you enjoy this show. We're going to do the best we can to make this a podcast that you like, make it creative, all of that. My co-host Scott Schultz is joining me. He's going to be here in just a minute. We're going to talk about a few things, but I wanted to get that out of the way, Scott. I don't know if you heard me just briefly what I said. We had a gentleman from England comment on our YouTube channel saying he loves the podcast. There's other people who say they love the podcast, and I was feeling a little sorry for myself because I did receive a negative comment or two of late, and those kind of comments make it worthwhile. I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the back. I'm just trying to say it's cool that people like this program, people enjoy it, and they listen to it. One gentleman said he's from England, so it's pretty cool that people at least 3,000 or so miles away from where I live really care about this show and what I do and what we do. So I want to say thank you to the listeners, and I want to say thank you to you, because this show would not be popular or doing what it's doing without you as my co-host. And no, I'm not doing this just because Scott's here and we're on the air. I do appreciate Scott, and I have to say Scott really champions it, because I don't give him the best notice in terms of programming and all of that, and he juggles a lot of stuff on his own life. So thank you, sir. I hope you appreciate some of the comments and compliments we've received from some of our listeners. And I kind of wanted to start the show off with that, because I don't want that to go unnoticed.
Yeah, and I think we do this more as a fun or passion. I mean, obviously, we're not getting paid the big radio bucks or TV bucks. We're not the 4-letter network or Fox Sports, and it's just because we have a very strong interest in the team, what they do. We write for the site. We like to write about them. We like to talk about them, because sometimes it's when you write, you only get to say so much, and it's kind of cool to get to talk for an hour or so every week or two and kind of share some more. And that's one of the cool things about podcast is kind of like capitalism, that if you like it, you can buy it, which of course is free. And if you don't like it, you can kind of keep walking. Hopefully you don't keep walking to the next one, but maybe people tune in just to say how horrible we are, and maybe people tune in because I think it's great. And I mean, I would say for the all the time me and you have done this, I think we've really enjoyed it. We've had some awesome guests. It's a lot of fun when we have other folks on here, because we tend to agree quite a bit. So it's kind of cool to have people on here who. No, usually they agree too. I mean, it's kind of hard to find a Bengals fan who says, Russell Bodine is great, or there's a certain things that we don't have a whole lot of. I mean, we do have some dissenting opinions, but it's not like it's not like we're intentionally trying to find people to butt heads and be very combative.
Right.
Bengals fans for the most part have a shared history of following the team, the struggles, never that playoff hump, and all the we all kind of.
We with this team, you got to commiserate, right? I mean, it's kind of the reality of things. But I just, I don't want to go on too long about, how great is our show? That's not what this is about. I just want to recognize the compliments that we've received from a number of different listeners, and I want to also, give a shout out to you, Scott, because I know you do a lot, you juggle a lot. You also do stuff for the cincyjungle.com site, as I do. So you and I juggle a lot, and this is a passion project, and I just appreciate your work. I appreciate the compliments, and I just kind of wanted to start the program off with that, to start off on a positive note. I hope you're okay with that, my friend.
Yeah, this is by far the best Bengals podcast I have ever done.
Well, yeah, you mentioned also the guests, and I do want to give a little a thank you. Recently, over the past couple of months, we had Rebecca Toback of SB Nation and Cincy Jungle. We had Joe Goodberry on, John Sheeran on, Cody Toomey on. We've had a lot of cool guests come on, and we're pretty blessed in that regard. That you could get the Mel Kipers and the Todd McShays of the world, but there are some other people that maybe don't have as prominent of a platform, but are just as knowledgeable on a lot of prospects and a lot of things. And we're blessed to have those connections. So thank you to all of those folks who have been our guest co-hosts over the past couple of weeks as well. All right, enough lovey-dovey stuff. I do see some other comments in the live YouTube chat too, and I appreciate those as well. I do see some questions. We're going to try and get to listener questions at the end of the program, as we usually do. So keep those coming. We appreciate it. We're going to try and get to some of those as we go forward. I want to start though with the fact that the Bengals have, in some form or another, taken the field. And we've gotten some first looks at certain guys, some workouts, all of that. The rookies seem to look good. The team seems to be in relatively good health. Obviously, their first-round pick, Billy Price, still nursing that chest, that pectoral injury he suffered at the combine. But he is running and doing things, so that's good news. And I do want to take a minute to recognize CincyJungle.com, Rebecca Toback and company. They've actually landed a lot of interviews with the Bengals' newest class. So I think Jesse Bates was one of them, their second-round pick. Malik Jefferson was also interviewed, and others. So go check those interviews out on CincyJungle.com, and we're going to try and get some of those players and others on this program as well. So keep your eye out for that. But one of the things I want to talk about, and what I thought to be probably one of the biggest pieces of good news for the Bengals, is the hype surrounding John Ross. And there seems to be a lot of good news about what he looks like, his speed, his recovery from his injuries. Andy Dalton's made some comments. I see that AJ Green was coming to his defense, and there are a lot of good things surrounding John Ross and how he looks this offseason. Now, one of the things potentially that's going to help him as a pro is his working out with TJ Houshmandzadeh. And some of these things can be taken out of context or blown out of proportion a little bit in terms of workouts. And if you work out with a former pro, a current pro, how does that really help? For me, I think his working out with TJ Houshmandzadeh is beneficial on the level of, Ross may have all of the natural skills that Houshmandzadeh didn't. The speed, the shiftiness, all of that. Houshmandzadeh was a great route runner. Houshmandzadeh was tough across the middle. Houshmandzadeh had good hands. And so it's kind of like he's being mentored by not only a guy who is familiar with the Bengals system and not that they're running the same offense that Hush was in, but he's familiar with the Bengals culture, obviously, and he's a guy who can teach him the nuances of what made him. It's kind of a very different type of tipping of the scales. You got Ross, who has the speed, the explosion, the big playability, and he was a top 10 pick. And you had Houshmandzadeh, who is the guy that, great hands, slot guy, reliable, not very fast, all of that, but still very successful and found his niche. And, if he can maybe give or tutor Ross on some of those complementary skills that maybe Ross needs to work on, route running, what have you, that Marvin Lewis maybe hinted at as to a reason of his rookie season being demised, I guess. I think that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And what I don't know is if I buy into the hype around John Ross. Is this a team and players simply kind of doing the coach speak / player speak type of thing where, hey, we're going to build this guy up. He needs his confidence, all that kind of stuff. Or is this for real? Maybe it's a little bit of both. I think it's a little bit of both. I think that, I think John Ross obviously will take big strides this year. Now, the question is with John Ross, will he get the opportunities? Will he get any opportunities on special teams, which is something that he did well in college on kickoff returns? I don't think that's going to be the case, unfortunately. I mean, I think we've talked about this on the show before. I think the Bengals need to get the ball in their most explosive players' hands in every regard possible, but I don't know that they're going to risk a top 10 pick on kickoff returns, punt returns, that sort of thing. We'll see. But I think that this could be a very, very big year for John Ross in his career. I mean, it's nowhere to go but up, kind of, from last year anyway. But I think I think this could be a very big year for him. And I think that if, and call me Captain Obvious, I guess, but I think if he can maintain health and if he can do some things on the offense, whether it's, the kind of the deep play balls, the screen passes and yards after the catch stuff, or both, if he can do that, and if Eifert can stay somewhat healthy, if not fully healthy, big ifs, this offense could be going back again to the 2013, the 2015, some of these better offenses we've seen from the Bengals. You got AJ Green. AJ Green's going to be AJ Green. We know that. We've got other guys on this offense that, Tyler Kroft filled in for Eifert last year, had 7 touchdown receptions, nothing to shrug your shoulders at. Brandon LaFell is Brandon LaFell. I think he's decent and okay. I don't think he's a game breaker by any means, but he has had a couple of big plays with the Bengals. And then, you mix in Eifert, you mix in John Ross. I think that's going to be pretty interesting when it comes to this. And I see Dean Burke in the YouTube chat. John has to work on playing physical. In college, he burned by everyone. But there are guys in the pros that can hang with him, and I don't know if he could win those jump balls against quality CBs. Yeah, so I'm glad Dean brought this up because, I mentioned Ross working with Hushmanzada, footwork and route running and all of that. I don't want to make it sound like John Ross was a poor route runner in college. That wasn't his issue. Speed most definitely wasn't his issue. Hands weren't really an issue. And he could run. He wasn't the one-trick pony guy. He wasn't the guy that just went deep. If you look at his college tape, you look at his highlight reels, all of that, you will see a guy who can do a number of different things on tape. And that's why he is worthy of a top 10 pick. I know people now go, oh, gosh, what a waste. He wasted his rookie year. I get it to a certain extent, but it's 1 year. If we start seeing a Cedric Ogbuehi type of pattern, then maybe we can have this conversation. But there are things on film that make you believe that he is could be a very good NFL receiver. But Dean is correct. It's more of the bump and run stuff. He's not the biggest receiver. So when guys, if you get the long, strong corners on him and you get on there early, if they get on him early in a route or, bump him off of what he's trying to do, all of a sudden the entire play is kind of blown. Or if a play was going his way, it's not really what he's doing. But to Dean's point, it sounds as if, he's been working out more heavily. He's been, doing things to help his entire pro career arc. And I hope that this is something that, will bode well for the Bengals this year. They need him. And I don't know if they need him to be the number 2 guy. I don't even know if they need him to necessarily be a number 3 guy right away in terms of receiving option, but they need a guy that can take attention away from AJ Green, can take the top off of the defense, has the ability to score on a deep ball. I think if Ross finishes with, 700 plus yards and 6 or 7 touchdowns on 50, 60 catches, I think that's a pretty successful season, especially given what he didn't provide last year. You may want, the dual 1,000-yard guys, the green, but that's just, it's not always realistic. But I think if you can get 600 or 700 yards out of him, you can get the big plays out of him. And you can do, it doesn't always have to be the deep ball. It could be a slant. It could be a screen pass where he can kind of do his thing. I think that's going to be a big key for the offense's turnaround. We could talk about the offensive line. We could talk about all that stuff. But I do think Ross is a big key to what the Bengals want to do in 2018. Now, he may not be the primary guy, but that doesn't matter. I'm going to get my co-host thoughts in just a minute here. He stepped away for a second. He's going to come back, and we'll talk more about John Ross and other players on the Cincinnati Bengals, namely the new guys that we saw over the past weekend with the rookie minicamp and workouts and all that kind of stuff. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, though. I'm Anthony Cosenza. My co-host Scott Schulte is here. You can get this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, CincyJungle.com, and you can get in touch with us on Twitter at BengalsOBI, and you can get in touch with us via email, theobinsider@gmail.com. So get the program, get in touch with us. If you have questions, we want to hear from you. Also do us a favor and subscribe. You know, if you're not able to join us live on YouTube, that doesn't mean you can't still watch the videos and all of that. So subscribe to YouTube, subscribe to our iTunes channel, subscribe to our SoundCloud channel, get all the stuff as it comes out, and we appreciate the support there. Scott, I was talking about John Ross. There's been a lot of positivity around Ross this
I've heard of him.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. There's been a lot of positive stuff about him. Now, I guess my question, I think it's a little bit of both. I think obviously there is improvement, and people will see things he is doing this year that he was not doing last year. But I also think it's some of the veterans, some of the coaches, the quarterback, what have you, kind of publicly propping him up to make him to raise his confidence level that may have been shaken a bit last year, given everything that transpired. Your thoughts on John Ross, these comments, whether it be from Andy Dalton, AJ Green, Ross himself, he is working out with TJ Houshmandzadeh, and the potential impact on the Bengals offense in 2018. Yeah,
I mean, it's one of those things where obviously we were all disappointed with what he did last year because he was rarely on the field. And then when he was on the field, obviously, we don't need to go in that too well. He did not do what we were kind of hoping. But you still have the thought this guy is a first-round pick. He was injured last year. We all kind of knew he was injured. I think it's, a bit too early to write him off. Whether someone, liked the pick or not, the fact remains that, the team wasn't going to use him very much. Marvin Lewis is going on record saying he doesn't love, to use rookies unless he absolutely has to. He doesn't trust them. He's afraid they might make a mistake, whatever. And, the other thing too, is you look back at the history of like first round pick rookies and of course there's no guarantee that this guy's going to be a great player or bust. I mean, right now we just don't know, but I think one thing he has going in his favor is if you look back at some of the players who have been recent first round picks who you could say, okay, these guys just, did not pan out for whatever reason, just have not been very good. The one nice thing is he doesn't seem to match their traits. So I think there's some hope because you look at guys like Jonathan Baldwin, AJ Jenkins, I'm not quite sure why they got drafted in the first round. They just didn't seem to have the talent. Justin Blackmon obviously had issues off the field. You could argue someone like Philip Dorsett was kind of similar because he was a speed guy, but he didn't really have the resume that John Ross had. John Ross was considered as a better overall receiver. Someone like Tavon Austin was short and undersized and kind of a gimmick player at West Virginia. Kevin White was like a big athletic dude, but just wasn't a great receiver. He keeps getting hurt. Laquan Treadwell was kind of raw. And the guys who haven't done well, I think some people can look at John Ross and say, well, yeah, he's another one, but he doesn't seem to fit their mold. Coming out, he was considered, he's a straight, fast guy, but he does more than that. And I think the most encouraging thing was when he met with TJ Houshmandzadeh, I think back in February or January, and they were running routes. And I really liked what TJ said because TJ is a guy I think a lot of Bengals fans respect because he played for them for a long time. He was a late round pick, a guy who worked through the ranks, fought his way from being, he wasn't even the top receiver drafted from his own college because that was Chad Johnson, who the Bengals drafted in I think it was the second round that same year. And, the things that he said were like, this guy, he just hasn't had the good coaching he should have had in college, kind of got away with his speed. But you kind of got the impression that TJ was like, this guy has what you want to see. And so I think there's like that hope that, hey, he's starting to get that now. He's starting to get what he needs, that, he's, I remember in the old days, and this is going to date me and you because, we're not as young as these millennials or some of these kids. There was a day when, guys like AJ Green and, Odell Beckham just didn't enter the league and all of a sudden crank out 100 yards and 10 touchdowns. There was a way back, it was kind of considered a receiver's first, great year was his third year. His first year, he'd do very little. His second year, he'd do a little more. And that third year was like that breakout year. And anyone who ever did fantasy football back in the 90s or whatever, that was like the gem. Like you look for those third-year receivers because, that was the year they're going to pan out. And I think Ross is kind of like on that track. He's not a guy that you're going to come in year one and all of a sudden catch 100 balls, get 1,000 yards, even if he was healthy. He seemed more a guy who, he's got the speed. He's kind of got the traits, but just isn't quite there yet. And so right now, obviously there's a lot of optimism. I mean, hopefully in October, we're still as optimistic as we can be now. There's no reason not to be, because the people who are in the know, who see him on a regular basis, all seem to be positive. And I think that's kind of the thing you want to hear. I mean, if those guys weren't positive, then I think we might have a little trouble. So until he proves us wrong, I'm inclined to maybe drink the Kool-Aid, maybe more than I should, but.
Okay. Yeah. Nothing wrong with it. I mean, I guess the only thing that could happen is you get, a little bit of a disappointment if he doesn't live up to it. But, you like to hear that he's working, especially working hard, especially after such a disappointing rookie season. You like to hear that he's healthy. And you like to hear that some of the most important people on the offense, Andy Dalton, AJ Green, are speaking highly of him and speaking highly of what he looks like, what he's doing, and all of that. So, we'll see what happens if with John Ross. But I think if he could be, at least this year, a number 3, a good number 3 or number 4 receiving option. Now, again, you got to look at your top receiving option is always going to be A.J. Green. Eifert, when healthy, he's going to be probably your number 2 outlet, especially in the red zone. You got LaFell kind of floating in there, Mixon, Gio, all those guys are in the mix. I think if he could be a number 3 or number 4 outlet and still provide the big plays, the pop, nothing wrong with that. And I think I really hope for him. He seems like a nice kid. Seems like he's trying to, do things in his second offseason to really make a better pro career for himself. And I think if he turns things around, the Bengals offense will turn things around pretty quickly. Scott, the other, aside from Ross and hearing about him and his workouts and how he looks and all of that, is we got our first look, at least a little bit, from the rookies and the undrafted free agent class and all of that. Things look pretty good. Billy Price was doing some things, running and all of that. He's got that chest injury, so he's going to be, they're going to bring him along a little slowly. I'm sure by training camp he should be good to go and probably will lock into that starting center position. But your thoughts on the Bengals rookie class taking the field? To me, I mean, aside the obvious answer to this question of who could provide the biggest spark immediately for the Bengals in their rookie class, Billy Price comes to mind just because he's first-round pick and should be the starting center and all of that. Is there anyone else you think that could potentially, whether it's in the rookie class, the undrafted class, whatever, actually may have a bigger impact immediately on this team than Billy Price? Or is Price just the guy that, huge position of need, huge unit that needed help, first-round pick, he's the guy? I mean, there are a couple of guys I think that could come in and provide some immediate value. I just don't know if they're going to be more a higher impact player than Billy Price. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's got to be Price, because you kind of figure he's slated to, barring injury, to take every offensive snap this year, which is something they tried to do with Bodine for the last 4 years. Is once they get their center, they like to keep him in there unless he's just, even if he's awful, they'll probably still keep him in there, as we saw with Bodine and Guycheck. And so, barring injury, I think, it's by sheer volume, it's got to be Billy Price. That being said, if we're looking for a guy, kind of like a second guy, if we kind of all agree that, hey, Price, just because he's playing, every offensive snap, so he's going to have the biggest impact. No one really projects to do that. Most of your people look to be probably rotational. Guys like Darius Phillips and Devontae Harris obviously are stuck behind, Kirkpatrick and Denard and William Jackson at cornerback. Alden Tate, if he makes it, he's stuck behind like 20 other people at wide receiver. Mark Walton is stuck behind, very good pair of running backs. Sam Hubbard, obviously Carl Lawson showed that he deserves more snaps. Jordan Willis is entering his second year, and that's even behind the two starters. So I think if anything, it's kind of the easy answer, but you're looking at the first few picks, and I think it's not just because they are the first few picks, but it's also because they are the guys who fit an area where the Bengals have the biggest need. And you could, and one would be Jesse Bates, because the Bengals really haven't had a good free safety since Reggie Nelson left. And I know Aloka's played that position. Personally, when I watch him, he looks more like a strong safety, which is kind of what Sean Williams is. Neither one is a Ed Reed type of guy. They're both pretty solid and, up near a line of scrimmage, run support. They
like to hit. Yeah, they like to hit.
Yeah, they love to hit. They can cover a guy if they need to, but they're not a guy that you just kind of trust saying, go deep and you're just going to ball hawk and get everything. That seems to be where Jesse Bates seems to be different than them. So I think depending on what they decide to do with the defense, with the new coordinator, Bates has a good chance to get more playing time than people might realize if they decide to, do something like that, like a single high safety or something where they want to roll, more. I know they used to do a lot of nickel. If they do something like that or something where they want to put, maybe with the linebacker shortages, maybe, if they decide to put someone like a Aloka or probably more like a Sean Williams in that kind of hybrid safety linebacker role, and then use, Aloka and maybe Bates as safeties. So I think he has a solid chance to get playing time. And I know there was a video on Cincy Jungle last week of him with an interception. So it's kind of cool because it's kind of what you saw in college. He was a guy that, he plays the ball, and that's kind of what he does. The other one, Malik Jefferson, and that's only if, because obviously Burfict's out. But you have to assume Lewis is going to let him give him that chance, because obviously Preston Brown's starting in the middle. And you figure Vigil and Vinny Ray, just because their experience, are probably going to get the first crack at the next two spots in that rotation, which means, Malik Jefferson then has to fight through the rest of what's left. So if you go by talent alone, he may have more of more of a chance. If you go by seniority and some of that stuff, it's probably less likely. So the easy answer is, just because looking at playing time opportunities, I think it's got to be the first three picks in that order: Price, then Bates, then Jefferson. I hate saying that because it's more fun to kind of pick, the 6th round pick's really going to surprise people and get a ton of playing time. But the way the roster shakes out, I just, barring injury, which you don't want to have happen, it just doesn't look like they are built that way this year.
Yeah, and maybe Mark Walton is in there, depending on injuries at the running back position, if those occur, God forbid. And what they, and maybe they try him as a kick returner. Maybe they, put him in certain sub packages, and he's a guy on offense. It's just an exciting little, a guy. The Bengals are not, say what you want, and it hasn't always worked, but the Bengals are used to playing 3 different running backs on offense. They did it with Hill, Gio, and Mixon. Hill wasn't that successful, but they know how to spread the ball around within the running backs. And I think Gio is going to be more of a receiving type of option this year, just based on Mixon becoming kind of the workhorse, quote unquote, guy. Them adding Walton, he could be in the argument. To me, yes, Billy Price is the obvious choice, but I still look at Malik Jefferson. I look at a guy that he's big, he's fast, but he's raw. And that's what we keep hearing. He needs to work on his football instincts. He needs to work on sometimes angles and wrapping up and tackling and all of that. But he is a big play guy, kind of looking for a place to happen. I actually, today in my day job, today being Wednesday, for those of you who aren't joining us live, I spoke with a coworker at my day job who is a UT alum, and he knows a lot about the Longhorns and all of that. And I said, hey, I don't know if you and I have spoken about this, but the Bengals actually drafted a Longhorn linebacker. He's supposed to be pretty good. He's, oh yeah, that guy's great. That guy's awesome. Of course, he's gonna lift him up a little bit. But I just said, yeah, he's big, he's fast, he's quick, and he's got a little polishing to do, but I think he's going to be pretty good. He's like, yeah, give him probably a year or two, but he's going to be a guy that's probably going to be a very good player for you. And I would love to hear, not that I don't, I love Vinny Ray as a guy and what he's done for the Bengals and all of that. I would love to hear some of the rumblings, if you remember, Scott, back in the 2009 offseason when Ray Maluga was kind of a backup linebacker to Dhani Jones and Rashad Jeanty, if you remember that name. And they were simply like, we can't keep this guy off the field. We can't not play him. He is too good. And if you remember, I think very early into the season, he ended up being a middle linebacker for the rest of his career, but he ended up taking that strong side linebacker position from Jeanty. I had a pretty decent year as a rookie at that respect, but same thing with Burfict. They were almost like, we got to find a place for this guy. Now, unfortunately, it ended up being later on at the cost of, another Bengals linebacker who ended up losing his life a little bit down the road. But same thing. You heard the rumblings about Vontaze Burfict from the coaches and everything. I think you get what I'm saying. I would love to see something like that. Linebacker is one of the bigger positions of need as well, like offensive line. I would love to see and hear some of these headlines. Hey, Malik Jefferson's turning heads, and Malik Jefferson's the guy that we can't keep off the field because he's too good. I think he could be one of, if not the best player in this class. I don't know if you agree with me or not. He is boomer bust, and that's where you got to go in third round. But that's kind of my thought.
Yeah, he's definitely boomer bust, and I think as opposed to some of the other boomer busts they've had in the past in that selection, I like his upside, even his floor, better than some of the guys like the Margus Hunt. I mean, Margus Hunt was another boomer bust, but just had no instincts, no feel, looked slow. And you see this guy, it's like, okay, he's boomer bust, but it's a very different kind of boomer bust. He was a guy that was considered a great prospect, coming out of high school, seemed to put it all together this third year at Texas, has shown some flashes that, you kind of see that, hey, this guy seems to have all the tools there. He seems to, kind of shine this. If this all gets together. Now, granted, the odds of that happening, his historic track record isn't that great, but if it does, it's like, man, this is really cool. Whereas someone like a Margus Hunt in the past, we've had a boomer bust. It's like, oh, dude's big and strong, doesn't really seem to have a sense, kind of like Obuehi. He's big and strong, doesn't really seem to have a feel for the game. I like that, at least this guy seems to understand what you're doing out there, plays with some, aggression and some speed. And so, yeah, it's way early to tell. And of course, that is the one nice thing about this time of year is that all 32 teams are pretty much, going to say the same things about all 7 guys or 10 or however many they picked. Man, we got the best 6th round pick in the draft, or oh my gosh, we got the best receiver in the draft in the 5th round, and man, we got the best quarterback, and he wasn't taken until the 4th. Whatever. Because until they prove you wrong, you can be very optimistic.
And everybody's going 16-0 this time of year, right?
Yeah, even the Browns are going 16-0.
That's right. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I'm Anthony Cosenza. He's Scott Schultze. Thanks so much for tuning in live here at YouTube and CincyJungle.com. We appreciate it. We've gotten some questions. We're going to get to those in a little bit. Scott, in terms of, this is funny because if you remember, gosh, months ago, we talked about, visits and who the Bengals have talked to in the pre-draft process. And one of the guys was Chris Worley, the guy from Ohio State, linebacker, a guy he did stuff on special teams and was more of a good player on a great defense or a great team. Even you, the resident Ohio State guy, asked you about him. You're like, yeah, I know a little bit about him because he just wasn't the biggest name on that defense. Bengals drafted Chris Hubbard, a bigger name on that from that defense, or Sam Hubbard, excuse me, from that defense. Obviously, Billy Price, big name guy, 1st round pick, and now they bring in Chris Worley, an undrafted free agent. To me, he is a guy that has almost every year, even in their best years, the Bengals seem to get guys on their 53-man final roster that were undrafted rookie free agents. Hardy Nickerson was one recently. Heck, Vinny Ray was an undrafted guy that the Bengals have had on their roster for a long time. There are a lot of guys that Vontaze Burfict, undrafted guy. So to me, Worley seems to be a guy that could fit that mold. Is there anybody else Now, I noticed you did mention Kevin White, the Bears wide receiver. The Bengals recently picked up his younger brother, Karan White, from West Virginia as well recently. Big play guy, smaller than Kevin White, but still had a decent career at West Virginia. Whether it's him, whether it's Worley, whether it's whoever else, do you see any diamonds in the rough in this undrafted free agent class?
That is very hard to say without having a chance to, like, I guess, really see them in preseason or training camp. So at this point, I don't have any. If I were to say, someone other than Worley, he's obviously the biggest name. He's not a guy that if you watch as an Ohio State fan. There's some linebackers you watch, you're like, wow, I thought James Laurinaitis, Chris Spielman were just, when you watch them play, like, this guy's good. When you watch Worley, you weren't like, now obviously if you were thinking that, he probably would have been drafted. And that being said, there was I think the one guy who kind of sticks in my mind as someone who might have a chance is, and I cannot remember his name, but he was gosh, where the heck did he even play? He was a center from
Oklahoma State.
I think that's it. Just because, and the reason I'm throwing him out is I have not had a chance to watch him yet, but just based on need at the position, I think they're pretty well convinced that TJ Johnson's not the answer. I mean, he was a guy that they used last year at guard for a few games and then benched him right away for Trey Hopkins, who played out the rest of the year. And Trey Hopkins was, for a first year starter, wasn't really special, but had outplayed Johnson. Johnson had never been able to oust Bodine from a starting spot, which, that is what it is. But that being said, if they, if you figure Price is a starter, I think TJ Johnson isn't guaranteed to be the backup. So I'd say, someone like the kid from Oklahoma State very well could make the 53-man roster and could end up being that backup, unless they decide to do something like try one of the guards over there, like Hopkins or Redmond. I think they moved Hopkins there while Price was injured a couple weeks ago. That may also be another indication that maybe they are thinking TJ Johnson's on the way out. So depending on how it all shakes out, I mean, obviously they are now without Andre Smith, they're without Eric Winston, Russell Bodine. I think some of the old guard at linemen at the lineman position could be out the door. I think TJ Johnson is probably not coming back at the end of this year. And so then you look at, okay, who's a guy that they could replace him with? And just based on the fact that he would be the only, I guess, true center would be. So if I'm picking someone, where we're just kind of throwing darts at names because they're, it's an undrafted guy. That's the guy I'm going with, just based on positional need.
So Brad Lundblade is the gentleman's name.
Yes,
he went to Oklahoma State. And what was interesting, the Bengals entered in their this little mini camp over last weekend, and they got rid of 3 guys that they had, and they added 3 guys. So Lundblade was one of them. Stony Brook safety Tyrese Beverett was another, and Ferris Bueller. Defensive tackle Chris Okoye was the other addition that they had. I have no idea if he's related to Christian Okoye or what have you, maybe. But I like that. Even though you weren't too familiar with Lundblade, I do like that pick. I think the Bengals are scratching for offensive linemen, especially guys that may be able to play a couple of spots so that they can maximize the roster and what they're trying to do. So, and obviously Oklahoma State came from, the kid's coming from an explosive offense, an offense that was very productive, especially in the passing game. So, he's got skills, there, and it was kind of a little bit of the knock on Mason Rudolph in terms of the fact that they didn't really run, so-called traditional, totally under center offenses, but, very productive and, he's got skills. So, good pick there. I like Worley. I think he's got a shot to make the roster. I really do, especially with, maybe even if he's a guy that's on there for the first 4 games and they put him back on the practice squad or what have you. I think he's probably got more skills than some of the guys they've had. I saw someone mention in the YouTube chat, Brandon Bell, other guys. I think he's got more skills. Another interesting guy, and Michael Myers put this out there. Quentin Flowers. Any thoughts on him? The USF quarterback turned running back / wildcat guy. Is he a guy you could see making noise, or is it just too much of a niche type of thing and too much of a project type of thing?
I mean, there's always that chance. To me, it seems more like a Braxton Miller or the kid from Michigan who went to Jacksonville a few years ago, whose name escapes me, was a quarterback, played running back for a bit when they had Toby Gerhart. But yeah, I don't know. To me, making that positional change isn't a guaranteed thing. And I mean, it's very rare you see those guys make that change from quarterback to wide receiver. I know Antoine Randall L did it, but outside of that, we had guys like Matt Jones from Arkansas. Granted, he was very different, built more like a tight end. But for some reason, when I think of Quentin, the name that comes to mind is Benny Brazell. I know it's different skill set, but he was a Blazer, was a great speed guy who they thought, hey, let's just try him at wide receiver. And I think it seems to be when it comes to the draft and undrafted guys, when they bring kids in, there's a lot of where you kind of throw something at the wall and see if it sticks, where, hey, this guy's really tall, this guy's really fast, this guy's really strong, this guy's from Germany, Morris kid, whatever. Hey, let's just and see if one of them sticks at wide receiver. And you kind of see, even with the success rate of first-round picks or second-round picks, it's not as easy as just saying, run and catch a ball. There's a lot of nuance with, reading the defense, running the right route, getting separation, making those tough contested catches. Are you catching it with, strong? There's just a lot to it to make that adjustment. So I'd be very surprised. I mean, it's possible, but just based on the track record, I'd be really surprised if he does come out as a wide receiver and makes the team. The thing I could see him possibly do is maybe pull an Alex Erickson, where they try him in special teams on punt returns, kick returns. It'd be nice to see them try, a few different guys out there, and just because I assume we're not going to have Adam Jones anymore. So that opens the punt. I do hope that they have an open competition with Erickson and then whoever else, because that's kind of how Erickson got the job. They gave him a chance and he wilded in preseason. So I think if he does make the team, I think it'd be something like that, where he returns a few kicks or a few punts, and the team's like, wow, did you see what that guy just did? Where it just becomes too impossible to keep him off the team.
Yeah. Especially with whether you look at him as a running back, a wildcat guy, or quarterback. The Bengals brought in Logan Woodside. They have Matt Barkley. Unless running back, they brought in Mark Wall. I don't. Good story. I hope he does well, and I hope he proves me wrong. But he's got a lot to show and a lot to do before he makes the final roster there. But a lot of good players in the undrafted free agent class that the Bengals brought in yet again. They do a very good job of that. And I do want to say, CincyJungle.com talks about all the pre-draft visits, as do a lot of the other, news outlets. But when you look at those, that's a pretty good indicator. Yeah, sometimes they use them on draft picks, but that's where they really use the visits to get some of these undrafted free agents in the door and get access to them and talk to them. I mean, I know they met with Flowers. I know they met with Worley. There are a lot of guys in this undrafted free agent class that they had pre-draft visits with, and they probably said, either number one, we might take you late day 3, or if you don't get drafted, expect a call from us and expect an invitation and a possible opportunity to make the team. And these guys are doing it. And you saw Worley, he made some comments about, it's kind of tongue in cheek, but he said, well, the Browns suck, so I root for the Bengals. But he also said, I specifically went to Cincinnati because I want to make the team, I think I have a shot, and I like the coaches and all that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of refreshing. In an off season where we haven't heard all of the best news, it is refreshing to kind of hear things like that from even an undrafted free agent from a big time program like Chris Worley. I'm Anthony Cosenza. That's Scott Schultze. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. You can get this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, CincyJungle.com, and you can get in touch with us on Twitter at BengalsOBI and via email, theobinsider@gmail.com. We appreciate all the feedback. Scott, I don't know. I was going to ask you about some fantasy football advice. I just don't know if it's a little too early, and I don't want to put you too much on the spot. I mean, it's May. Really, the only thing people really would be looking at in terms of fantasy football this time of year would be in those legacy type of leagues. I'm not currently in any legacy leagues. I think you are, correct?
No, all of mine are redraft.
Okay, so I don't know if you got any advice. I would love to hear some, but or if you've got maybe a sleeper guy in the NFL draft this year that you think could be a fantasy guy that not many people are talking about. I'm open to it. Otherwise, let's get to listener questions. Your choice, my friend.
At this point, yeah, I'd say at this point I don't yet, and I may have to disappear here for a second. So I'm going to say it's turn to listener questions, so I don't start with something and then just kind of cut out.
All right. So let's do those and then get out of here. We appreciate the questions we've received, and some of these were from the YouTube chat that we saw earlier in the chat. Well, and there's also some in Twitter. Okay, so we're gonna try and get to as many as possible. Okay, so there was one from listener Eshket in the live YouTube chat, and I thought this one was pretty interesting. What are the chances of Josh Malone having a breakout season? To me, breakout season is totally subjective in how you want to classify that. There are some fans, at least from the commenters I've seen on Cincy Jungle and Twitter and all of that, that think that Malone is a fringe roster guy. To me, I think he's pretty much the lock for the number 4, number 5 receiver. Now, what does a number 4 and number 5 receiver really do in the Bengals offense? I don't know. I think that where he's going to kind of make his hay in the NFL is as a deep threat guy, because he's a height, weight, speed guy, and in the red zone. And I look at, to me, if you remember back in 2003, for those of you who remember, he's kind of a Kelly Washington guy. And Kelly Washington was a guy who, before Chris Henry arrived on the scene in 2005 for a couple of years, he was 30 catches, 40 catches, maybe 3-4 touchdowns a year. He was more famous for his little squirrel dance. If you remember his touchdown celebration, that was always fun. And if you don't remember it, go look up Kelly Washington squirrel dance on YouTube. But to me, if Malone has kind of a career like that, at least for a couple of years for the Bengals, where it still allows Ross to make big plays, A.J. Green to be A.J. Green, Tyler Eifert to do some things in the red zone, that's where I think that would be my ideal fit for a guy like Josh Malone. I don't know about you, Scott, but that's – and I don't know if that's even classified as a breakout season to some, but he's not going to supplant John Ross. I don't think he's going to supplant Brandon LaFell. A.J. Green's going to be the guy. I don't know.
Yeah, if breakout means like someone like Stefan Diggs or Willie Snead a few years back, where this kind of, or Cooper Kupp, this past year, they kind of came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden it's like, man, this guy's like on pace for 1,000 yards. I don't think that is him, because like you said, some of the names you mentioned, I think as of right now, the Bengals hierarchy is going to be Green, LaFell, Boyd is going to get his shots as, the third-year receiver. John Ross is going to get every opportunity to prove that first-round status. So there's your top 4, I think, right there. Malone's upside, I think, this year is fighting for number 5. And let's say one of these guys does beat out Alex Erickson as the kicker. That opens, maybe 15, 20 targets or receptions this year. So I'd say that number 5 spot is a open competition. I could see, Josh Malone probably having an inside track for that. And then I think if he were to break out, the biggest opportunity for him would be not in 2018, but in 2019, because that's the year when I think LaFell is no longer on the team. I think this is the last year of his contract. So obviously AJ Green's still going to be here. At that point, Boyd and Ross have had their opportunities. They've established who they are or who they're not going to be. And if neither of them steps up, LaFell's gone. You have a little window where someone can kind of step in there. I think that would be the chance where Malone could possibly, come in and be that guy, maybe be the deep guy that Ross was supposed to be. I think the challenge with Malone is he's never, like at Tennessee and with the Bengals last year was never a great catcher of the football. I think he had caught like 6 out of 17 targets or something last year. And granted, targets are not always like perfectly catchable passes, but that's still not a very good ratio. and I think that's something that has to get improved upon if he is going to be considered a guy in the future that is looked at as more than just like a depth guy like Cody Core or James Wright were until the next 6th-round pick came in the next year and pushed him out.
Yeah, and AJ Green's here until in Cincinnati until 2019. So after 2019, his contract expires, and he obviously had that huge deal where he's making essentially $11-12 million a year. So his contract is up. So I mean, he may be again one of those developmental guys that all of a sudden, a couple of years down the road, like you said, LaFell's gone. Maybe AJ Green is either gone or at the back end of his career, and he signs kind of a team-friendly deal. I mean, you have to understand AJ Green's in his 8th season coming in here. I mean, that's pretty crazy to think about. So, and by the time that his contract expires, he's going to be entering his 10th season. So, I mean, business decisions are to be made there, but I think Malone's going to just kind of be a role player this year. Maybe spot big play here and there, and just given his 6'3" stature, he is a guy that you can use in the red zone. So we'll see there, but I don't know if I see like a breakout year, a year where he's going to supplant Brandon LaFell or anything like that. But he's got big playability and he's got good size. I did see some other comments, just kind of a little asterisk on this last question here, Scott. Any thoughts on Auden Tate, the 7th-round pick out of Florida State, another guy who's a red zone guy, big guy, I think he's 6'4", 6'5", 220, 230, almost tight endish type of size. You think he can do anything in terms of cracking the roster and making some plays, or is he kind of a developmental practice squad guy?
I'm guessing he's practice squad. I know he's a bigger body receiver, one of those guys that has the frame that you're looking for. I think they would probably still have to work on things like separation and routes and some of that kind of stuff with him. He's a guy that they can probably get in the practice squad without too much difficulty. Kind of given that how far he fell pretty much to the end of the draft, that I think teams are not going to use a spot on their 53-man roster to take him from the Bengals. So barring something like a Desmond Briscoe thing where, another team overpays to put him on their practice squad, I'd say he should have a good chance making the Bengals practice squad if they go that route.
Yeah, and he apparently looked good in the rookie minicamp this last weekend. So,
okay, yeah.
What I hope doesn't hurt him is the last name Tate, and I think he's wearing number 19 as well, which is just, oh, buddy, you gotta know better. We did get a question on Twitter. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because it is so early, but the dude who sent it to us, Carlos Andre, is an awesome guy, a big supporter of the program. Essentially asking the question, if everything goes well, previous injured guys play the whole season, meaning Ross and Eifert and others, I assume. He's asking about Super Bowl. Very early for me to even answer this question remotely. To me, even though preseason games mean nothing, you do see some things on film there that do bode well or not well for a team into the season. I don't want to go into this. I think this is maybe a question we readdress, a couple months down the road, maybe in August, that sort of thing. But to me, my thing is Super Bowl, way too high aspirations for this team right now. I mean, I want them to aim for that. I want that locker room to aim for that. But for me, I don't see that happening. But I am higher on them. And I wrote a post on this on Cincy Jungle, kind of asking the question, like, why is the national media and national pundits, why are they so low on the Bengals? It kind of seems like maybe it just wasn't a sexy draft class, and they just haven't had good seasons the past couple of years. I don't think we should be talking about Super Bowl yet, but I also think there are guys that have him picking number 2 overall next year. I don't see that happening. So I don't know. Your take on that, Scott?
It's like what Jim Morris said. Playoffs.
Yeah, playoffs.
Playoffs. That being said, I think number 2 is way too. As far as Super Bowl, the one thing I'll throw out, and this view probably won't change until they prove me wrong. As long as Marvin Lewis is the head coach, who is 0-7, whatever, in playoff games, it's very hard to assume they're going to be anywhere near a playoff as long as he's there. The one exception I think was in 2015. The team was just so good with all the assistant coaches they had. Everything was clicking. Eifert was healthy. Hugh Jackson was running a very good offense. The defense, everything was kind of clicking off until Dalton got hurt.
Yeah,
they looked like a team that was, they were beating good teams. They were beating up on bad teams. They were 10-2 and Dalton went down. Marvin Lewis could not do enough to slow that down. I mean, that train, that CSX intermodal train was going down the track. And no matter how hard Lewis was grabbing the back of it, grabbing the end of train signal and had his feet, bumping on the railroad ties, trying to stop that thing, he just could not get that train stopped. And now, granted, that train's not moving, it's a lot easier. So, if we see from Terrell Austin, and we see, okay, this offensive coordinator now has a whole year to run, the offense, kind of get things lined up. You've replaced some of the holes at center, at left tackle. You kind of get some of these things fixed. I think you could possibly get to a point where they're just so good they can overcome the Marvin Lewis factor. I mean, early, so that's very optimistic.
I'm laughing because it's just such a great, the team is so good they can overcome their own head coach. It's just like such a funny thought if you actually break it down and think about it. But
essentially that's what they have to do, what they did in 2015, where Eifert stays healthy the whole year, you fix the line, and you get to a point where we are just so good that not even Marvin Lewis can slow us down.
Just get out of your own way. Don't even bother. Just let the guys do their thing.
Yeah, and where he's basically on the track and the train just goes. It's not something he's going to derail it. He's just going to get picked up by the cow catcher, and that's going to. Now, if no one knows anything about trains, and disregard everything I said. Just the main point was, if they can get to a point where they're good enough to overcome Lewis. Otherwise, Super Bowl, I think, is a bit.
Well, I think we understood the visual. We understood the visual. I think we got it. If anyone who's watched any kind of Looney Tunes or whatever knows the visual you're kind of talking about there. But too early for and I guess it's better that this team is underrated rather than overrated going into this season. So there's that. I think a major, again, we'll readdress this question maybe more in August, but a major factor has to be health, especially on offense, and it has to be the offensive line. I mean, it is what it is. They've got talent in other spots. They kind of reloaded some other spots. I think there are the problem with this 2018 team is there are major ifs. It's John Ross, it's Tyler Eifert, it's the offensive line, it's can some of the aging guys on the defensive line, Michael Johnson, Carlos Dunlap, Geno Atkins, continue their production, or can Michael John? Some people laugh at the Michael Johnson production thing, but can they keep that up? We're talking about guys now who are entering their 9th and 10th season, depending on which guy you're talking about. So can they keep up some of the production that they've been giving the defense? And can some of these young guys fill in for Vontaze Burfict? Will Vontaze Burfict even play the entire 12 games that he's slated to play because he battles injuries? So there's a lot of ifs. But I think if the ifs all fall in line and they do fall into an area of wow, that John Ross works out, Eifert stays healthy, Burfict plays 12 games and is awesome, Geno Atkins continues to be Geno Atkins, and so does Carlos Dunlap. Guys like Sam Hubbard and Carl Lawson and all of that help out the pass rush. A guy like Jesse Bates can turn the ball over in nickel packages. All of a sudden you're looking at this. It's a good team. Joe Mixon takes a step in year 2. Geo does Geo things. It's a pretty good team. It's just there are a lot of a lot of puzzle pieces that need to come together in order for this team to even be talking about playoffs, Super Bowl, anything like that. And if it does, awesome. Unfortunately, this team is just not always the team that gets the best draw of things, the best luck. So we'll see. We'll maintain positivity, though. I'm going to tie 2 questions in together, Scott, so we can get out of here. But I think they are somewhat interrelated. Dean Burke in the YouTube chat says, basically asked about Marvin and playing rookies. He does say excluding Price, but playing rookies, I think Price is a necessity there. So playing rookies, do you think he's going to be willing to do that? And then kind of a piggyback on that, and it's from Austin Tran, about Frank Pollock's development of the offensive line. Obviously, Billy Price plays into that. So if you can kind of maybe tie those in together in a nice, neat ribbon, nice, neat bow, that would be great. And I don't really know what I think about these two, so that's why I'm letting you lead off on this one.
Let's see. I would say as far as playing rookies, I mean, Marvin is still Marvin. I know even if they've hinted at maybe they're going to play rookies more, it's one of those things that, yeah, he says a lot of things. I mean, last year they were saying some things before the season too. They were saying Cedric Ogbuehi, he could play offensive line. They were saying Bodine was a good center. They were saying we're going to every year you kind of hear, we're going to change things. We're going to change things. We're going to do things different. This offense is going to be more dynamic, or we're going to, run the ball more, and then they get 3 yards to carry. And, until he shows it, I think after 16 years or whatever it's been, I think it's very hard to believe Marvin Lewis is suddenly going to play rookies. So outside necessity, which I think right now is Frank or Billy Price, I think everybody else is more rotational at this point, where the first half of the year, you'll see them kind of rotate in and out occasionally. And then maybe the second half of the year you see, where maybe they start getting a third the snaps defensively, in addition to special teams play. If they do more on that, that'd be really cool. I'd be surprised. As far as the development of the offensive line, the biggest thing I want to see is I'm very curious who they start at right guard and right tackle, because obviously with Alexander there, you knew it was going to be Bodine at center forever. They were probably going to keep throwing Ogbuehi out there. With him gone, they obviously upgraded left tackle with Cordy Glenn, who they traded for. They still have Clint Bowling at left guard. You now have a new center, but then right guard, you kind of have a 3-headed race with Trey Hopkins, who started there most of last year, Westerman and Redmond, who rotated the last 2 games at right guard. I think Westerman started 2 games and then, or I think it rotated left guard, and then Redmond came in as a backup. So I think those 3 are probably competing for that one right guard spot. So it'll be very interesting to see how that shakes out, and to see if maybe one of those guys ends up being really great, and it's another Evan Mathis, Nate Livings thing where we're like, man, that guy's so good. Why did we leave him on the bench for so long? And then right tackle right now is a very interesting thing, because it's just, it's almost like which guy's the least worst, because you have Ogbuehi, who is, I think everyone who's done anything media-wise has beat up on him. So yeah, we know his story. He struggled in college, struggled at right tackle in 2016, struggled at left tackle in 2017. He'll probably get a chance if he isn't cut before the end of the year or before the season starts. I think he will get a chance. I'd be surprised if he gets it. But then you look at the competition, you're like, well, maybe he has a really good chance, because you have Jake Fisher, who unfortunately hasn't been much better, although he did have the heart dysrhythmia. So you kind of hope, maybe that was holding him back. And now that he's fully healthy, maybe he's rejuvenated. He has, the heart. I don't know. I'm not a medical doctor. I don't know how, a heart, an irregular heartbeat affects him, if that takes away strength or blood, whatever. But now if he's fully healthy, he's in the competition. But then you have to figure, well, would this come back? Could this be a setback? Could he have a complication from it? So he's kind of in the mix. He might be the leading guy, but there's a huge question with him medically. Yeah, Bobby Hart, who's in the mix, who looked when he was signed as just like an insurance guy until they get their right tackle in the draft. Then they use 11 picks and they don't take a left tackle. And it's like, I guess this guy's in the mix now. And he was a guy that, was not very good with the Giants. They ended up cutting him. They were some rumors he kind of quit on the team and just struggled and was not, I think Pro Football Focus, for whatever it's worth, rated him 78th out of 83 right tackles last year, or tackles last year. So has never shown any ability. And then you have Kent Perkins, who's kind of this odd man out, who I think might be a fan favorite just because he was an undrafted guy. He looked good in very limited snaps last year in preseason. So at this point, you know, any one of those guys, you know, it's not like we have Willie Anderson sitting there. It's kind of like, I don't know. So with Frank, I guess long story short, with Frank Pollock, I'm just very curious to see how that shakes out. You know, which of these three guys who all look like they could be qualified at right guard, which of them turns out to be the guy? And then at right tackle, from this mix of, you know, question mark upon question mark of unproven, of guys who have struggled, can he manage to turn one of them into a solid, decent right tackle? Or maybe that right tackle's on another team right now and we're going to grab him on cut down day.
Yeah. There are the post June 1st cuts, and then the Bengals have made the occasional move after final cuts. You know, there are some surprising final cuts from teams, and they, you know, Brandon Tate was a guy that they picked up in that regard. They've made some offseason trades in the past, whether it's for Cordy Glenn or Kelly Jennings or Reggie Nelson or what have you. I mean, they've made a number of trades before, so that, you know, that's an option as well. I do want to say, you mentioned Bobby Hart. What's interesting, if you look at Bengals.com and the roster, they have him as a guard/tackle. So he was never a guard, at least to my knowledge, with the Giants. So pretty interesting that they have him as kind of a swing guy. I think if Frank Pollock can get something, even remotely looking at solid to above average starter out of Jake Fisher or Cedric Ogbuehi, I think getting it out of both is, at this point, it's not going to happen. If he can get one of them to be an above average or, you know, slightly above average starter at right tackle, I think that would be a major feather in his cap. It sounds like, based on all of the guys that are working on the offensive line, they really like what they see out of Frank Pollock. I think Billy Price is a shoo-in for center position unless he's not healthy, unless that injury just does not heal correctly. Then the Bengals have some major decisions to do there. But, you know, I think he is making a major impact on that. And this goes back to what I was talking about with maybe a little bit of a lack of love from the national media, in that, you know, it isn't all about the draft picks. It isn't all about the offseason acquisitions from a personnel standpoint. Yes, that's obviously all of it, or it's a good portion of it, but you have to look at coaching changes. And I think maybe why they're not so keen on the Bengals is because Marvin Lewis is back. But under him, you mentioned Terrell Austin, defensive coordinator. He's a guy that's a hot name. He had head coaching consideration going into this offseason. You know, the Bengals bring in different secondary coaches. They bring in a new offensive line coach in Frank Pollock. So, you know, they've made changes, and sometimes the coaching changes make all the difference. And we'll see. I'm going to give you and we're going to get out of here in just a second here, Scott. I'm going to give you my prediction as to and again, we're in freaking mid-May, but I'm going to give you my starting 5 offensive linemen as we sit here today on Wednesday evening, May 16th. And, you know, you can download the show later. It might not be May 16th when you listen to this program, but I have, obviously, Cordy Glenn at left tackle, Clint Bowling, left guard, Billy Price, center. I have Christian Westerman at right guard, and I have Jake Fisher as the starting right tackle. I don't know if you differ from me, but that's kind of what I have. I have Cedric Ogbuehi being a swing backup at left tackle and right tackle, and I have Bobby Hart being a swing backup at guard and right tackle. And then, you know, maybe either TJ Johnson or this the gentleman we talked about earlier from Oklahoma State is maybe the swing center guard backup type of guy. But I that's who I have as the starting 5.
I think that's generally the consensus. There's actually a post on Cincy Jungle that I think Yeah, I was gonna say I think I wrote, but yeah, I know I wrote it. I think it came out today. Is what I was trying to think.
Sure?
Actually,
sure.
Pretty sure. Although they always get edited. I guess my English isn't good enough or something. They usually get tweaked in different titles. Whatever. Anyway.
Me speak English. That's impossible.
Yeah.
For you Simpson fans out there, that was the Simpsons line. Anyway, go ahead.
So anyway, it goes over the offensive linemen, and it goes over every player. What are their odds of starting? Who are the starting guys going to be? And at the end of this, so if you're listening to this and you have not gone to the site, feel free to go to the site. I think you can find a link to that article on my Twitter, even though I think it just goes automatically because I don't actually tweet or whatever regularly. But anyway, at the bottom is a poll, and you can vote who is going to be the right tackle this year. And the consensus, 2/3 was Jake Fisher.
Mm-hmm.
He is by far the big winner. I will point out Perkins and Bobby Hart are both around 10, 12%. And there's not really an other on the team right now. Other got over twice as many votes as Aboyehi has.
Interesting.
So it kind of tells you what fans think of Aboyehi.
Well, yeah. I mean, and there was another post on CincyJungle.com, or I can't remember if it was Cincy Jungle or another site, but it was talking about, the validity of trading Cedric Aboyehi this offseason. And, I don't see it. You're not going to get much in return. And, I mean, at least, even if he doesn't prove to be an improved player this offseason, at a minimum, you have a former first-round pick who's going to be, a backup, a guy that you can plug in for a couple of games if you need to, and that sort of thing. But, right, it's so funny. From center to left tackle, it's like basically in cement at this point, especially now that the draft's done. It's that right side that's very strange. And the Bengals drafted an offensive lineman in the 7th round. I don't think he has the ability to crack the starting lineup, but that's me. At least not in 2018. I think that is maybe something that could be a possibility down the road. And this kind of goes back into the question. I didn't really address this, but this kind of goes back into the question of Marvin Lewis playing, young guys and all of that. I think the Bengals have a pretty good idea as to what they're going to do on the offensive line, and it could change. Yeah, Rod Taylor is the gentleman I'm thinking of, the 7th round pick, offensive guard. The Bengals have a pretty good idea as to what they're going to do, especially with those 3 positions. It's just, are they going to let him duke it out? And I would prefer to see Westerman. I think Westerman has much more upside than others at the guard spot, but we'll see. And I'd like to see either Fisher or Aboyehi turn their careers around and potentially become starting guys. But I think it's going to be one or the other, not both. That's just, I don't see them doing much of anything. And I think, if like I said, if Frank Pollock can do something and get something out of those guys, I think that's a big feather in his cap and will be a big key for the Bengals in 2018. Scott, any final thoughts?
Yes, one thing I just wanted to throw this out or offer this up while we're talking about Frank Pollock and offensive line, because I know a lot of folks are talking about how great the Cowboys line was. He was the Cowboys offensive line coach. So he is clearly, the godsend of offensive line coaches. He's going to come here, and the Bengals are going to go from horrible to great. One thing I just want to throw out as a word of, precaution or just something I was kind of thinking, actually I looked into it and I'm like, well, before we get a little too excited, if you look at the Cowboys offensive line, Tyron Smith was already there. Pollock became their offensive line coach in 2015. Tyron Smith, the left tackle, was already an All-Pro by that point. He had been with the Cowboys 4 years, was a 2-time Pro Bowler, already a All-Pro. Travis Frederick was already there 2 years, already a Pro Bowler. Zach Martin had already been there, had already been named All-Pro. The only starter was really La'el Collins, who was drafted, or I guess he joined them. He wasn't drafted. He was supposed to have been drafted. He was, first-round prospect that fell for
Yeah,
their feet.
that was that whole thing was like, what?
So they kind of, and I don't know why no one drafted this kid, but that being said, you know, the line, he pretty much had an awesome line when he stepped in there. It wasn't like he came in and he said, "Ooh, get that Frederick guy," or let's get the. He was basically, you know, he walked into a situation that had a great line, you know, with great people who were already there, who are already playing at a very high level. So I just, you know, want to make sure we keep that in mind and just don't assume that because he stepped into a great situation that he's going to step into a situation in Cincy, which was anything but great last year, and then instantly turn it around. So
yeah, I think we have to exercise caution about all of that, but I you know, and again, unfortunately, a lot of this stuff that you know, you're right, but I will say he was the offensive line coach from 15 to 17. He was the assistant offensive line coach from 13 to 14 with the Cowboys. So I mean, he does have some experience there, and I think, you know, whether it's assistant level or not, that's something to note. But I think we got to exercise caution, and you know, I think a lot of people think that Pollock's going to be this miracle worker on the offensive line. He very well could be, and what we're hearing from Bengals offensive line players, you know, it sounds like they are receptive to what he's doing, and he is doing things in a much different way than Paul Alexander. Which, you know, Paul Alexander had his strong points as a coach. I've mentioned it on this program that, you know, I have a contact who is a college football coach, and Paul Alexander, in terms of offensive line coaching, is one of the most highly regarded coaches at that rank across the country, and people travel across the country to go hear him speak at public things about coaching and all of that. But he was with the team for almost 3 decades, and who knows? Maybe things got a little stale, and change for the sake of change is good. And, you know, I think Pollock, for the most part, is bringing a nice change to the Bengals and their offensive line. Scott, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Not really, just that it's late, and I may just stay awake, because that's a good thought.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I know you're juggling a lot, and you know, I appreciate you coming on and doing what you do and bringing the knowledge that you do. You are much appreciated in this program, my friend. And I thank you to all of the listeners who have stayed with us not only live tonight, but who have downloaded the program on different platforms and whatnot. You can get this program on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, cincyjungle.com, and you can get in touch with the program via email, theobinsider@gmail.com, and via Twitter @BengalsOBI. That's going to do it for us tonight. We talked about a number of topics, and it sounds like things are looking okay right now. It's early. The Bengals have a lot to do this summer, and there may be more acquisitions on the way. But for the most part, they've got the roster set. It looks pretty good, and they're making steps in the right direction. Let's hope it pays off in the regular season. I'm Anthony Cosenza. He's Scott Schultze. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next time.